About 150,000 years ago, humans created a tool that, without exaggeration, is considered to be the most important invention in the history of mankind: the flint knife. For a long time, humans used this tool for hunting or other household chores. When wars came into the life of mankind, the knife changed from being a household tool to an instrument of war. After a while, man came up with the idea of making an elongated knife blade, and so conceived the first weapon that was invented and used exclusively for war: the sword. The oldest sword found dates back to about 3300 BCE. It was Arslantepe, Turkey, and was made of arsenic bronze. This sword was 24 inches long. The invention sparked the imagination of blacksmiths. Whatever form this weapon took, the most important task for blacksmiths has always been the same: to improve the fighting qualities of weapons. Even in ancient Egyptian times, man understood that if a blade is curved, its cutting properties are significantly improved. An example of such a sword is the koipesh. However, this curvature had a downside, because it was almost impossible to stab with such a blade. The loss of stabbing ability of the sword did not play a significant role back then, but in the late Middle Ages in Europe, when warriors were dressed head to toe in iron armor, without stabbing ability, a sword was almost useless. Blacksmiths solved the problem thanks to the high-quality steel and forging tools of the 15th century, when perhaps, without exaggeration, the ideal blade for warfare was made. The pinnacle of sword evolution was the flamberge, or flame-bladed sword. This sword has a distinctive wavy blade style. The indentations on the blade can be parallel or zigzagging. Because of these ripples, the sword was able to cut through a soldier's armor and the multi-layered garments and still deliver a very dangerous jab. As modern tests of this sword show, the stabbing blow could pierce even light metal armor without getting stuck in it. This problem was often observed with straight blades. Cutting below made the blade very wide and deep wounds that rarely healed, which gave rise to legends of poisoning the sword and led to the church banning it on the battlefield. Though, similar to the ban on the crossbow, no one actually listened to the church on the battlefield. This sword gained maximum popularity in the late 15th century, when mercenary infantry, condottieri and langschnett, who were often armed with two-handed swords, entered the war arena. They brought glory to the flamberge, having quickly assessed the merits of the wavy blade. Very soon, the flamberge gained the reputation of being a formidable weapon. Let's be clear about one thing. Flamberge is not the name of the sword, but the type of blade. It was most commonly used on the two-handed sword, the zweihander, and the rapier. Some sources say that warriors with flame-bladed rapiers were not taken prisoner, but executed on the spot, because of the insidiousness of their weapons. Often the enemy, even if he defeated such a warrior in battle, often died from even the most minor wounds. Nothing is perfect in the world, and physics cannot be cheated. So by improving its cutting and stabbing qualities, the sword sacrificed strength and was heavy. The wavy shape of the blade created many stress zones in the metal, which combined with the unevenness of the load on the blade, gave a much greater risk of breaking the blade when striking or deflecting a blow. Of course, the blacksmiths tried to fix this problem by making the blade from the highest quality steel they had, which significantly increased the price of the blade, and consequently decreased the number of buyers. However, another interesting thing about the sword was that the ripples on the blade gave a significant advantage in defense. In fact, when repulsing an attack, the opponent's blade stayed on the waves, not sinking to the crossguard of the sword. Although for a two-handed sword, this property cannot be called an advantage, as it did not allow for free sword fencing. Our next blade, however, was based solely on this quality, that is, gripping an opponent's sword and breaking it. Medieval cities were very dangerous places. Even an ordinary stroll could end in death at the hands of brigand. Every self-respecting citizen was required to carry a sword, or at least a dagger. During the Renaissance, a special method of fencing was invented that combined these two weapons: a rapier, or one-handed sword in the right hand, and a dagger in the left, the parrying dagger. As the name implies, they were designed to parry or defend, and very unusual forms were invented for this blade, like this dagger, swordbreaker. I think from the name you have already understood the main purpose of the blade: to capture and break the swords of the enemy. It was, of course, very difficult to break a sword with this blade. To catch the enemy's weapon, it had big serrations along one side of the blade, resembling a comb, which formed a trap. It was used in the 15th to 17th centuries. But this weapon was not very widespread because of the complicated technique of wielding and little usability as a dagger itself. However, you have to agree that this weapon looks very cool. Just as cool was the trident dagger, which served the same purpose. This dagger had blades divided by length into 3 parts, which folded together to resemble a regular blade. When the mechanism next to the handle is released, the 2 side blades open at the pressure of the spring, forming a trident, spreading apart until they are stopped by the ends of the curved fins. This creates a dagger capable of gripping blades more securely and easily. Like the sword breaker, the triple dagger was a rare form of parrying dagger, and was not very popular in Europe, unlike its Japanese counterpart, which became probably the most popular weapon in Japan in its day. You probably know this weapon quite well, as it's often shown in movies, but the movies don't really express the degree of its genius. I'm talking about the sai, the most popular weapon of medieval Japan. If you think, what about the katana? If you think the katana should be the most popular weapon in Japan, then you've been misled by the movies. After all, the katana is one of the most difficult swords to produce, unlike the sai, which combined brilliance and ease of manufacture. After all, this dagger could have been created by any Japanese village blacksmith from an ordinary steel rod. And yet, in combat, this weapon was almost equal to the katana, and in experienced hands, it was even superior to it. You can only admire how a well-sharpened katana can cut a silk handkerchief, but it will not be able to cut a steel rod. That's probably why the sai first appeared in Japan, to counter the katana, a task the weapon performed superbly. Also, this weapon was made in great quantities. After all, only the nobility could afford a katana, but anyone could get a sai. This weapon became popular in Japan around the 16th century, when in 1588 it was forbidden to carry swords and other weapons. This ban, however, did not apply to the upper class and samurai warriors, who like to take advantage of the sujigiri rites and test their new katana on a random passerby. This practice literally allowed a samurai to kill a random passerby at a crossroads with impunity. Perhaps that is why the Japanese are still so polite today. Politeness did not always save people from such brutal Japanese customs, and sometimes they had to defend themselves. That's how a blade that could be easily hidden under the clothes and was able to withstand a katana came into being. The sai was worn mostly in pairs or even 3 pieces, with the first blade thrown at the enemy and the others used in a pair. Despite its small size, the weight of the sai was about 1 kilogram, which is comparable to the weight of a one-handed sword. This allowed them to deliver powerful blows and made it possible to grab the weapon in reverse to use it as a bludgeon. Also, its small size made it possible to parry an opponent's sword without much skill, or to catch it with its handguard, as the trident dagger did. If you attach the sai to a long shaft, you could turn this weapon into a full-fledged spear. This weapon was incredibly versatile, with its ease of manufacture and cheapness. It combined a stiletto, a primitive sword breaker, and a baton in one weapon. When used properly and skillfully, it could even pierce plate armor. On some sai, not only the central bar was sharpened, but also the sides, which expanded the possibilities of its use. This blade offered many possibilities for wielding, which eventually even gave birth to the martial art of saijutsu. This art was taught at night, and the present-day rule that no noise should be made while practicing the techniques properly comes from the time when weapons were forbidden in Japan. While village blacksmiths honed their skills in making stealthy sai weapons, the blacksmiths at the emperor's court created katanas of increasingly larger sizes, until they made the largest sword in human history, the Norimitsu Odachi. This weapon looked very similar to the katana we are used to, but it was much larger. This sword was 12.37 feet long and weighed almost 32 pounds. Swords like this make you believe these images to be true. Don't be frightened though. This is only a 2007 Japanese movie. Unlike the movie, the sword is real and was not made with modern technology, but back in the 15th century. You might ask, how was this sword used? The question still intrigues researchers to this day. Obviously, even a well-trained samurai would not carry a 12-foot monster onto the battlefield. They will develop shoulder pain before they can cut down their enemies. Any object weighing more than 10 pounds would wear out the poor soldier. Because of this, people began to wonder why such a large odachi was forged and who would use such a thing. Some researchers even began to attribute a supernatural appearance to this sword and argued that this weapon was made for a giant. This is highly unlikely, and that it's probable that the weapon is a display of craftsmanship and a way for the smith to make his mark. If Norimitsu Odachi is a blacksmith work of art, then the urumi is an art form in itself. This blade, invented in India, was more like a whip than a sword. It was made entirely of metal, so wielding it required great skill. It is believed that it existed in the Sangam period, that is almost 2,500 years ago. The urumi's handle was made of iron or brass supplemented with a crosshead, while the blade was made of steel with flexible edges and was 3/4 to 1 inch wide. Ideally, the length of the blade would be the same as the owner's arm span, usually 4 to 5.5 feet. Multiple blades are often attached to a single handle. The Sri Lankan version had up to 32 blades. The urumi is treated like a chain, but it requires less force because the blade combined with a centrifugal force is enough to cause injury. As with other soft weapons, urumi owners learn to keep track of the momentum of the blade and control it with each swing. Techniques for using it include spins and sweeping maneuvers. These long swings make the weapon particularly suitable for fighting multiple opponents. When not in use, the urumi is carried coiled around the waist like a belt, hilted at the side of the wearer like a normal sword. However, it is difficult to call the urumi a regular sword, like a following sword. The shuanggao, or hook sword, originated in China. The appearance of early types of this weapon is attributed to the period of the Warring States. The most famous variant was called tiger head hooks. The classic version of the shuanggao has the following design. The main part of the weapon is made in the form of a steel strip, one end of which is bent as a hook, and the other end at the hilt, sharpened. In the area of the hilt, a blade was attached with 2 hooks in the form of a crescent moon with its sharp ends pointing outward. The front part of the blade, the concave part of the crescent moon, and the outer side of the hook were sharpened. The total length of the weapon was about 1 meter. Shuanggu were mainly used in pairs. They were used for cutting blows and grappling with the hook. Stabbing and chopping blows could also be made with the crescent moon handguard, and stabbing blows could also be made with the sharp end opposite to the hook. Sometimes, the inside of the hook was not sharpened, allowing you to use the grip on this part of the weapon and strike like an axe. It was possible to interlock the shuanggao with hooks, and thus suddenly increase the distance of the attack. The following blade is designed for a close contact with an opponent, even very close contact. It was not an easy task to kill an opponent in jousting duels or during skirmishes between warriors fully clad in heavy armor. You could beat your opponents with a sword or mace as much as you wanted, but often it was this little dagger, the misericorde, that played the decisive part in such a fight. It was a long, narrow knife used in the Middle Ages to deliver a swift death to a severely wounded knight. A blow of mercy, hence the name of the blade, derived from the Latin misericordia, act of mercy. The blade was thin enough to pierce through the gaps between the plates of armor. The blades could either pierce through the visor or eye holes on the helmet to puncture the brain, or pierce holes or weak points in the armor, such as under the arm, to penetrate the heart. Although killing can hardly be called an act of mercy, it is not a good fate for a warrior to die a long, agonizing death. It is amazing how the Middle Ages were able to combine a fervent faith in God with constant warfare and endless death. Although to the medieval knight, modern warfare may seem even more terrible, with the use of weapons of mass destruction that are capable of wiping cities from the face of the earth, and soldiers devoid of all honor marching to kill people in another country only because they believed the propaganda that they were saving someone. What do you think? Feel free to write in the comments. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give us a like. If you want to support the channel financially, the link to Patreon is in the description. See ya!